The Siddis, an African tribe living in India. In the period spanning the 7th through to the 20th century, Arab vessels brought significant numbers of trafficked Africans into South Asia as part of the system of Indian Ocean slavery. At its peak, as many as 10,000 enslaved Africans were transported from Africa to Asia via the Red Sea each year, with many being sold along trade routes into India. These enslaved Africans remained in India after they were emancipated, and their descendants can be found there today. The approximately 25,000 people of African descent currently living in India are most commonly referred to as Siddis, alternatively spelled Sidi, Cd, and their most concentrated communities can be found in the regions of Janjira, Gujarat, Andhra Pradesh, Hyderabad, and Karnataka. Even though the majority of these Africans were brought into the subcontinent against their will, it is important not to overlook the reality that Africans had some agency in their own migration and settlement. The surviving source record tells us that the majority of freed Africans did not desire to return home after they had been emancipated, and that a smaller number of Africans also arrived in the subcontinent on a voluntary basis as sailors, merchants, mercenaries, bodyguards, and household servants. A number of African troops from British colonies in West and East Africa were also temporarily stationed in British India during the Second World War. The African diaspora have made India their home, but they constitute one of the most marginalized communities in Indian society today, and are still fighting to be recognized as equal citizens. Aside from the exceptional instances in which African slaves rose to royalty within early modern Indian society, enslaved Africans were generally ascribed a lowly status as hereditary outcasts and continued to face social stigmatization even after they had been freed. These enslaved Africans were grouped together on account of their skin color, yet they had been captured from an array of locations across East Africa and the Horn of Africa and often did not share a language or culture with one another. The African diaspora have made a notable contribution to Indian culture. In the medieval to early modern period, a number of enslaved Africans rose to high-ranking positions in the courts of the sultans as trusted commanders of large armies, whilst others became the founders of dynasties. Most famously, history books tell of the African slave oligarchy of Janjira. Between 1791 and 1947, the princely state of Sashan was also under the control of an African heritage ruling class. Wealthy Africans and their descendants were the patrons of various mosques, tombs, and monuments. In Islamic society, it was not uncommon for enslaved Abyssinians to rise to prominent ranks within the army, with particular opportunity arising in the 17th century when Abyssinian war captives were employed as military slaves in India. In mainstream Indian history, the names of several men of Abyssinian heritage who rose to fame have been remembered. These include Sidi Yaqub Khan, Ikhlas Khan, and as Regent Minister of Ahmednagar, 1600 to 1626, Malik Amber reinforced his African identity by recruiting 10,000 Ethiopian soldiers within his army, which at its peak consisted of approximately 40,000 men. The majority of enslaved Africans in India were not treated favorably, however. African women were enslaved as concubines, a euphemistic term for sexual slavery. Europeans fueled this demand for sexualized slavery in some regions, such as by publishing newspaper adverts for female slaves wanted for sexual services. The Europeans gained a reputation for treating Africans with particular cruelty. The Portuguese Fidalgos, noblemen, in Gujarat province chained up slaves for auction, for example, and branded their flesh with hot irons. It is vital to recognize that European empires promoted anti-black prejudices in the colonies in more vigorous and systematic ways and introduced colonial racial structures to the system of slavery in the Indian Ocean. In this way, Europeans racialized the slave trade and exacerbated the perceived differences between Asians and Africans in colonial South Asia. British rule in India further heightened racial tensions between black people and Asians within the Raj. In a report to the British government, Sir Richard Burton stereotyped the city as having thievish, drunken, and fighting properties. In 1877, moreover, Burton characterized the African commanders of Gingera as mere pirates and sea thugs, despite the fact that they were the strongest power on the Konkan coast in the 17th century, stronger than the British trading nations. On the one hand, some members of the African diaspora, such as the Habshis of the Deccan, have become integrated into local Indian society through generations of intermarriage. On the other hand, however, many people of African descent living in India today exist as distinctly self-contained African-Asian populations and practice endogamy, marriage within their own community. The Siddis of Gujarat and Karnataka have preserved elements of their African cultures, most notably evidenced in their music, instruments, dances, rituals, and partial usage of Kiswahili and other Bantu languages. These same communities nevertheless self-identify as Indian, speak local dialects, i.e. Gujarati in Gujarat, Kannada in South India, and Urdu in Pakistan and Hyderabad, and have adopted local religions. While some members of the city community in the hills of North Kanara have become assimilated into local Hindu society, for instance, Christian and Muslim Siddis in the same region remain ostracized within their respective religious circles. The Hindu city and the Bilki and Yelapur districts of Karnataka have intermarried with the local community to a great degree and have successfully carved out their own caste status within the religious social order. This community only socialize with those of equal or higher status and continue to subordinate the Bandhis and Namadaris who rank lower than them in the pecking order. Class has been an equally influential factor when it comes to assimilation. The city population in Maratha, however, are the descendants of escaped African males, slaves who had intermarried with lower-class Indian women in Kanara. Free African men also cohabited with lower caste and tribal women in Makran and Gujarat. Surveys have found that the city people have dissociated themselves from the African continent on the grounds that it is an undeveloped region. This is perhaps unsurprising given that anti-black feelings are widespread across India. There is virtually a non-existence of positive representations of Africans in popular South Asian culture, and blackface persists in Bollywood. South Asian prejudices against dark skin can be dated back many centuries in fact, with colorism being rooted in caste ideology. Anti-black sentiments pervade ancient Sanskrit epics such as the Mahabharata, in which the terrifying fever, the personified embodiment of all ills on earth, is described as hideous, dark-complexioned. Anti-blackness was similarly expressed in ancient Buddhist ideology. Influential Buddhist thinkers Purana Kassapa and Makali Gosala in the 6th and 5th centuries BC had reiterated beliefs that humanity included a black species, who incidentally had the darkest skin and belonged to the lowest caste. Colorism has had an enduring legacy in South Asian society, and in 2013 it was reported that skin lightening products were a $200 million industry in India. Anti-blackness was also reinforced and given new legitimacy by the European colonial power structure. Across the British Empire, South Asians were privileged above Africans, whom they believed they were racially superior to. South Asians who immigrated to East Africa around the same time concurred that native Africans were also of immature mind and without brain. In the wake of World War I, many South Asians campaigned to make Kenya and Tanganyika sub-colonies of India, on the grounds that they were the ones who had been responsible for bringing civilization to the natives, who they referred to as bloody-thirsty indigenes and man-eating demons. People of African heritage constitute some of the most economically marginalized groups in Indian society today. The city in the forests of Gir and Western Ghat live in abject poverty. The approximately 8,000 Siddhi who live in the Junagadh district of Gujarat, moreover, who are the descendants of the male kennel keepers and female maidens of the harem employed by the last Nawab of Junagadh, also live in deprivation. They have in fact been identified as a scheduled tribe on the grounds that they are one of the most disadvantaged socio-economic groups in India. The Siddhi of India are frequently subjected to racial abuse and continue to fight for their rights as Indian citizens. Passport authorities often refuse to believe that the city are Indian, and they are treated as tourists when they visit urban areas. The city are often referred to as chimpanzees, Kalia meaning dark, and jungly in Pakistan, which means wild or savage. Racial stereotypes about people of African descent are encapsulated in popular sayings such as even, if a city bathes using 100 tons of soap they will remain black in color, and Habshis have big noses. In popular culture, the city are reduced to a basic racial stereotype, and only make a conspicuous appearance in Indian society when they are paraded as Goma dancers at national holiday events. In Gujarat, school textbooks have reinforced these stereotypes through describing the city as people who reside in the forests because they came from Africa. In reality, only a small percentage of the city population live in the forest regions of Gir and Karnataka. The discrimination that the city have faced is multi-layered, nevertheless, and they also face ostracization on account of their lack of formal education and economic backwardness.